Good morning. How are you guys? Good. Have you guys had enough of summer yet? Are you guys still? Yeah. What? Why are you sick and tired of summer? You've had enough of it. Why? You missed Allendale. That makes sense. Me too. Oh. Girls, are you sick and tired of? They're apparently sick and tired of summer. Oh, you guys are too? No, some of you are. Wow. I don't know. That's a little crazy. But we are in week 3 of our series, Enough, where we just see how God provides what we need, especially in our families. Sometimes we may feel forgotten, but God never forgets you. God never forgets what you guys need. Although people sometimes make promises without following through, God never does. So I'm excited to be, up here this week to talk to you guys. I think we've all experienced disappointment at times, especially when we get together with friends and you guys play. How many of you guys go to your friend's house and you play with board games or video games with them, right? Video games, board games. And how many times did your friend go, oh, it's going to be so much fun. We're going to have a blast with this. And you get there and it wasn't. You don't know how to play the game, or your friend was annoying during that time. And it doesn't live up to the expectations or exactly what he said or what they said. They're like, oh, it's going to be fun. And you're like, oh, it was a letdown. That's what we're going to talk about today. How many of you guys have those game nights at home, family game nights? I never did growing up, but I'm sure it's a lot of fun. But those family game nights, again, you're expecting this to be a little fun event where you get to play board games with your family, but then, the board game was boring, or your siblings were annoying, or at the end of the day, you lost. And how many of us really like losing? I was going to say, wait, if there were a few hands, good for you. At least you have that care for losing. But when I was growing up, I'm going to be a little honest with you guys. This is where I'm going to come and be completely straight honest with you on how my life was growing up. I will say my dad promised me a lot of things growing up, whether it was hanging out, going to do things with him, or, how many parents promise us to buy us something, right? And they never do. Whether it's something a little cheap or something real expensive, they just don't follow through. For me personally, growing up, my dad never followed through with pretty much anything that he said he was going to. And it hurt growing up, knowing that the one person I thought I could trust, I couldn't rely on his words. I couldn't rely on what he had to say to me. And so growing up, I had those trust issues, especially with him. So again, that's what we're going to talk about today, is just following through with what we say we're going to do. Loving words can lose meaning if they aren't backed up by intentional acts of care, support, kindness, or encouragement, especially in families. How can we be people who not only say we care, but we are intentional in showing it? So what we say we're going to do, we mean it, right? That's how we should be. So last week we talked about one of the original followers of Jesus, and that was John, one of the original disciples with him, who had that front row seat to everything that Jesus was doing. He was right there with him during that time. He was also one of the youngest in the group, and later in life he became a leader in the early church. His teachings were written to help future Jesus followers practice their beliefs. In 1 John, I put John 3:16. It should be 1 John, chapter 3, verse 16. It says, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can we live for God? How can we live for God be in that person? How can the live, dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." John had a front row seat to view the way that Jesus loved others. He saw that for Jesus' true love considers others and their needs. The book of 1 John suggests that we should be willing to sacrifice like Jesus. Not our lives. I'm not saying, and neither is John, saying that we need to lay down our lives for people, right? But we need to make that sacrifice of showing people what Jesus' love truly looks like. Whether that is giving up time or just some energy towards it. John reminds us that Jesus didn't tell his disciples what love is, but showed them what love is. While John stood at the foot of the cross when Jesus died, he saw that Jesus fulfilled his claim that he loves us in a unique way. Most people desire to be reliable people. We want our words to match our actions. So why do we find ourselves struggling? Why do we find ourselves falling short on our words? Falling short on our actions? At the end of the day, we're humans, right? We're going to fall short on our actions. The only one that could keep his promises has already kept his promise so far. He died on the cross for us, so we don't have that at death. But he's going to come back. He promised that. So far, he's fulfilled everything except coming back right now. So why do we as humans fall short on our actions? Loving others may not require as much intensity, but it means that thinking about what others need and being willing to work to make it happen. It feels great to rely on someone and then have them come through. When I have a friend that says they're going to do something, or even a family member, it feels great to know that they're going to follow through with their words and what they have to say. So I will say, as a small group leader, as small group leaders, we make sacrifices every week. We're here every morning to lead you guys, right? How many of you were at camp? How many of you had small group leaders while you were at camp? All those hands should be up, except for the adults. All the small group leaders that you saw there, all the volunteers, they were volunteers. They weren't getting paid to be there. They took time off from their job to be there, to help you, to follow through with their words and coming to serve you and to help you. I think it's a great thing to see. I think as a small group leader, it's great knowing that we can be there for you guys anytime that you guys need it, whether it's at camp or outside of this place. James, Jesus' brother, and said something similar in his letter, just like John did, to help his local church learn how to follow through and to follow like Jesus. James writes in his letter in life, and out of a desire to pass on his wisdom, let's look at the challenge that he poses to Jesus' followers. It says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it?" Next slide. In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by deeds. You believe that there is a God? Believe that there is one God, good. Even the demons believe that and shudder." Faith must be put into action. This is a big concept for James. It's important to know what Jesus said and remember his words, but more importantly, that we should put Jesus' example into action. James tells us that our faith or belief dies if there is no follow-through on it. When we see friends and family in need, we talk about how we hope everything gets better for them, but do nothing physically about it. We may say, "Oh, that's so sad, I'm so sorry." But those are just words. Where's our action to follow it, right? James equates our beliefs to actions. He says some people use only words to show their faith without actions, which is virtually worthless. Anyone can talk about what they believe, but it takes more energy to actually do what we believe. He says that following Jesus sometimes may require no words at all when we don't have the words to tell people what we believe or know is true. We can show them with our actions of love, justice, and peace. Actions are a powerful display of faith and can communicate to those that we love, especially our friends and family. At the same time, we're not called to sacrifice our own expenses continuously. James and John teach us that we only give out what we have to offer. When we see someone in need and we have their resources to help, we should find a way to help. If we're not in a good place to give emotionally or physically, we can be honest about that too. We won't, what that's trying to say, what I'm trying to say there is, if we don't have the energy to give, we're tired, we're exhausted, how are we going to be able to show others our faith and our love if we're just tired? There are times, honestly, where I'm too tired to give. I work too hard at work. I want to come home and do nothing. or it's been a really long week, and I get a phone call from one of my high schoolers, from my small group, that needs help. I will give it my all, but if I'm tired, I'm probably not going to give the best advice. I'm probably not going to show my faith or how much love that they need at that time. So we got to be able to take time for ourselves. I will say my time for myself, I always try to make it my Saturdays. Working 5 days a week, doing other things after work. I take my Saturdays for myself to fill myself back up with energy, because if I'm tired, I'm just not going to give it my all. How many of you are tired, when you guys are tired, especially in sports or other things you do, you give it your all? You're tired, you're going to be what? Like, I don't want to run. Are you giving it your all? No. In soccer, you run continuously. By the end of the game, if you don't get subbed out at all, or if you don't build up that endurance, you're going to be tired by the end of it, right? I don't know how y'all play soccer or run all the time. I would be dead by the end of it. You got to be fit, but you also have to practice, right? You practice every morning. So you're building that endurance up, right? You're building it up. So that's how we can do it with our faith and our actions as well. James and John were teaching later in their life, and I imagine they are teaching us how to live this way based on histories where they had both success and failures. James and John, humans, just like us. They're people. As Josh says downstairs quite often, the Bible is full of people, not just made up people. We're hearing real life stories about what actually happened. So when James and John is telling us these things about how to live out our faith, they were doing the same thing. Now, they weren't saying that they were perfect, right? They failed just as much as we're going to. But they're showing us and telling us how to live during this time. Even now, we can apply it to today. So how many of you guys are familiar with the game of Sorry? We all should be. Has everybody not? Okay, the game of Sorry, it's fun, right? So the premise of the game is to make it all the way around and make it all the way up into the safe zone and to the safe spot, the home base, whatever it is. So when you play the game, you get, say 7, and when you move 7 spaces, someone's there. What happens to them? They will go right back to the beginning. And what do you say? Sorry. Are you really sorry, though, when you say it? We laugh. We have fun with it. It's fun to send somebody back home during that game, right? But when you say sorry, what does sorry mean? I'm sorry I got caught, or I won't do it again. But in that game, is that how it works? Our words don't match up with how we actually should feel. Our words don't match up to our actions. We're not sorry. So our actions speak louder than our words. So saying sorry is meaningless if you're still being sent to the beginning of the game. While this makes for a fun game, it's not how Scripture tells us to live the rest of our lives. There is a power in empathy, and empathy just means to understand and share the feelings of another. I knew what the word empathy mean, but I had to put it into terms for my understanding as well. Because how many of you actually knew what empathy means? I did, but like I said, I had to look it up to make sure I was right. But again, it just means to understand and share the feelings of others. But there's power in empathy to see the needs of others and respond to them with our words and our actions. And if we can, that we should do it. And when we don't have the words to say, we can show people our love for them and our deeds, because we know our actions can speak. Our actions can speak when words aren't enough. Showing people love sometimes is more powerful than just speaking them. Showing up for someone can be just as powerful as speaking to them. Another part of a story of mine would be when my grandma was in the hospital, her final moments of her life, and someone came up. They worked in downtown Indy, that's where I was. They showed up. They were there for me. They prayed for me. But them just showing up showed me how much they cared and how much they loved me. So again, our actions can speak when our words aren't enough. He didn't have to say anything to me if he didn't want to. Just him showing up showed how important his actions were. So there's this poem by Phil Kay, and I'm going to read it for you. Here's what it says. I remember the bed just floating there, apart, 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 apart. My mother taught me this trick. If you repeat something over and over again, it loses its meaning. For example, homework, 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 homework. See? Nothing. Our existence, she said, is the same way. You watch the sunset too often, it just becomes 6 o'clock. You make the same mistake over and over, you'll stop calling it a mistake. If you just wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, one day you'll forget why. Nothing is forever. The poem, called Repetition, helps us see that our actions can speak when our words aren't enough. The poet Phil K. says he became more aware of every word he was about to say and how he would follow through on his words. Going back to it real quick, what really stuck out to me was if you make the same mistake over and over, you'll stop calling it a mistake. Right? If you make it once, you make it twice, you make it a third time, that's not a mistake. At that point, you're just doing the same thing. It's a repetition. If we want to become people whose actions speak loudly, we must consider what may hinder us from acting. So there's 3 things. Here we go. The first one, notice your feelings. Often we want to act, but don't know if it is the right time. Have you ever thought, that's so sad, when you realize someone in your family is hurting? Or maybe not that sarcastic. I'm a very sarcastic person, that came off the way. But you're saying, oh, that's so sad. Or you've become emotional when someone tells you their story. You're feeling empathy, which indicates you may be moved to act. Second one, notice your limits. Empathy helps us pay attention to others, which is good, but don't forget to pay attention to yourself as well. Are you about to offer too much? Are you acting for approval or obligation? You will discover that you don't have the finances, mental health, or emotional bandwidth to meet every need. And that's okay. But remember, you can only give what you already have to offer. Showing love should never make you feel violated or abused. Loving others does not mean neglecting yourself. Remember, take that time for yourself. You need it just as much. If you're tired, you're not going to give it your all to someone who actually needs your help or love. Third, notice your hesitations. Saying no to a request or need is okay. But when you know that you have enough to offer and don't, that's where John and James are challenging us. When you say no just because you don't want to or you're not feeling like it, it's not what James and John are trying to tell us. We have to act on our faith. We have to trust God and what they're asking us to do. Have an honest conversation with God, asking for strength to put your faith into action. The next time you sense God prompting you to do something, commit to following through. Empathy is a good first step, but consider responding with loving actions. To wrap up my story from earlier, like I said, it was hard for me not being able to rely on my father, not being able to trust him in the words that he said he was going to do. The places that he said he was going to take me, I told you he didn't, but my uncles did. Or my grandma ended up taking me. And it hurt, knowing that I couldn't rely on the one person I should be able to. I will say now, as an adult, he's definitely made up for those times, or he's trying to make up for those times. When I was talking to my aunt about this last night, because I was like, I need help. Help me try to wrap up this story. She said, I've heard your father say he knows that he was not there for you. And he knows he's trying to make up for that time now. And he is. And I can see that. Is he perfect with it? No. There are still fallouts. But that's okay, because I can still see him making that effort. But I had the right people there to show me the love, to have empathy for me, so I know what it's like to feel loved and for people to follow through with their words. It feels really good to be seen and not overlooked. And if you know that that's true for yourself, you can imagine how others feel too. In your group, I want you to spend some time planning on how to put our faith into action. Think about the one way you can follow through on a promise, and in one instance where you may need to say no to love people well, including yourself. One thing I could tell you that I do very often is I always think I don't try to promise people anything, because I am human, and sometimes I'm not going to be able to follow through with that promise, and I don't want people that I love and care for the most to not be able to trust me. I want to follow through on my actions, and I can tell you I fall short on that more than I'd like to. So I try my best to not promise, but I'm like, hey, I'll be there for you. And they know that. I'm not saying don't promise anybody anything, because there are times where you're going to be able to follow through with that promise. but be careful when you promise something, because you don't want that person to look at you and be like, I can't trust them. I can't trust them to show up and be there for me. But knowing it and not assuming what a person needs is important when loving others. One way to love them is by taking the time to consider how they receive love. It may take time to find out, but it will be worth it. Remember, that objective of showing love is not to gain anything in return. We desire to be people who help others in need and remain honest about our needs. To do this, we need to pay attention to our empathy, availability, and actions. This is how we become people who look more like Jesus. We believe that our actions can speak when words aren't enough. I'm going to pray, and then you guys will go to your small group.